I'm Barbara, 32, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. A beautiful home in Chicago, a thriving career in marketing, and a husband I trusted completely. James was my everything for 5 years, and my stepsister Audrey. We were never close, but I never expected what she would do. I never imagined the two people I trusted would conspire behind my back. Sometimes the perfect revenge isn't loud, it's calculated. Before I begin my story, if you're enjoying this, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Growing up in suburban Illinois, I had what most would consider a normal childhood. That is, until my parents divorced when I was 12. The split wasn't particularly nasty, but it left a mark on me. My mum moved to California for work, and I stayed with my dad. I saw her during summers and holidays, but my daily life revolved around my father and our close relationship. Everything changed when I was 15. Dad met Margaret, a divorced woman with a 13-year-old daughter named Audrey. Within 8 months, they were married, and suddenly I had a stepsister. From day one, Audrey and I clashed. Where I was studious and introverted, she was outgoing and social. I loved reading and art, while she preferred shopping and parties. But the real tension came from how she competed for my father's attention. "Daddy, look at my new dress," she would say, interrupting conversations I was having with him. "Your daughter is so talented." Margaret would gush when Audrey did the slightest thing well. I tried to be the bigger person, I really did, but as the years went by, the divide between us only grew. We tolerated each other at family gatherings, but never formed any kind of sisterly bond. By the time I went to college, we were essentially strangers living parallel lives. After college, I landed a job at a marketing firm in Chicago and built a life for myself. I worked hard climbing the corporate ladder with determination and skill. By 25, I was already leading major campaigns and earning recognition in the industry. My personal life, however, was less successful. A few relationships came and went, none lasting more than a year. Then came the day that changed everything. My college roommate Tasha was getting married, and I was her maid of honor. The wedding was at a beautiful vineyard just outside of Chicago. The late September weather was perfect, and the setting sun cast a golden glow over everything. I was busy making sure everything went smoothly when I literally bumped into James. "I am so sorry," I said, looking up to find myself staring into the most intense blue eyes I'd ever seen. He smiled. "Don't be. Bumping into beautiful women is the highlight of any wedding." James was the best man, a childhood friend of the groom. He was 30, tall, with dark hair, and worked as a financial analyst at a prestigious firm. We spent the entire reception talking, and by the end of the night, he had my number. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. He arrived with a single red rose and wore a charcoal grey suit that fit him perfectly. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I found myself laughing more than I had in years. He was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. "What about family?" he asked over tiramisu. "Just my dad's stepmom and stepsister," I replied. "My mum lives in California. We talk, but we're not super close. Dad remarried when I was 15. My stepsister Audrey and I never really bonded. Family can be complicated," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. "But sometimes the family we choose is more important than the one we're born into." 2 years of dating followed, and they were the happiest years of my life. James and I were inseparable. We travelled to Europe, explored Chicago's hidden gems, and built a circle of friends who adored us as a couple. On my 27th birthday, he proposed at the signature room on the 95th floor of the John Hancock Center with the Chicago skyline twinkling behind us. I cried as I said yes. Our wedding was perfect. A spring ceremony at the Botanic Gardens, surrounded by 100 of our closest friends and family. Even Audrey came, though she spent most of the reception flirting with James's single friends. She was 24 then, between jobs as usual, and already had a reputation for dating wealthy men. "Your sister seems fun," James commented as we watched her on the dance floor. Stepsister, I corrected. And she's always been the life of the party. The first 5 years of our marriage were blissful. We moved into a beautiful townhouse in Lincoln Park, adopted a golden retriever named Rusty, and established ourselves as a power couple among our friends. James was promoted to senior financial manager while I became an executive director at my marketing firm. We talked about starting a family soon, planning for 2 children, and all the typical dreams. Last year, we finally purchased our dream home in the North Shore suburbs. 5 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and excellent schools nearby. Everything seemed perfect. Sure, James had been working later than usual, and our intimacy had decreased somewhat, but I chalked it up to the stress of the move and our demanding careers. There were signs I should have noticed, the mysterious texts he would get causing him to step away to answer, the business trips that suddenly became more frequent, the new cologne he started wearing that I hadn't purchased for him. But when you trust someone completely, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Audrey had been in and out of our lives all these years. She would show up at family gatherings with a new boyfriend or call when she needed money. She had moved to Chicago 3 years ago after a breakup and occasionally joined us for dinner. I always noticed how she looked at James a beat too long, how she would find reasons to touch his arm or shoulder, but I trusted my husband. The last perfect day we had was our 5th anniversary. James surprised me with breakfast in bed and tickets to the symphony that night. We dressed up, enjoyed a fancy dinner at Alinea, and laughed over memories of our years together. He held my hand during the entire performance and whispered that he loved me more than the day we met. I fell asleep that night, feeling lucky and loved, completely unaware that my perfect world was about to crumble. The changes were subtle at first. About 3 months after our anniversary, James started coming home later and later from work. One night became 9 o'clock, then 10, then sometimes after midnight. His excuse was always the same: a big project and important client numbers that needed reviewing before tomorrow. I believed him because I'd always believed him. Then came our 6th anniversary dinner reservation at Le Colonial, the same restaurant where we'd celebrated our first dating anniversary. I sat alone at our table for 45 minutes, calling and texting with no response before he finally called. "Barbara, I'm so sorry. The Peterson account blew up and I'm stuck at the office. Can we reschedule?" I swallowed my disappointment. Of course, work comes first. I understand. But as I drove home alone that night, something felt off. James had never forgotten important dates before. He'd always been the thoughtful one, planning surprises and remembering the little things. 2 weeks later, he forgot my 32nd birthday entirely. No card, no flowers, not even a text until late afternoon when I finally called him. Oh my God, Barb, I'm the worst husband ever. The Mackenzie merger has me working around the clock. He came home that night with a hastily purchased necklace, still in the mall bag, with the receipt showing he'd bought it an hour earlier. I pretended to love it, but inside the doubt was growing. Then came the receipts. While doing laundry, I found a receipt from Gibson's Steakhouse in his pocket, dated the previous Wednesday, when he claimed to be working late. $480 for dinner for 2, including $200 bottles of wine. We never went to Gibson's together. I confronted him that evening. "Oh, that was a client dinner," he explained smoothly. "Didn't I tell you, the Jensen account? Huge potential." "You said you were working late at the office that night," I reminded him. His face hardened slightly. "Barbara, are you keeping tabs on me now? It was a work dinner. I must have misspoken when I told you my plans." I apologized, feeling guilty for questioning him, but the knot in my stomach tightened. The next week, I found another receipt, this time from a jewelry store, a woman's bracelet that cost over $1,000. When I mentioned it, he became defensive. "It was for my mother's birthday," he snapped. "Why are you suddenly checking my pockets and questioning every purchase I make? Do you not trust me anymore?" His reaction made me feel paranoid and controlling. I apologized again and promised to stop snooping, but 2 days later, while using his iPad to order groceries because my phone was charging, a text notification popped up from someone named A. The message simply read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, same place." When James came home, I casually asked if he had plans the following day. "Budget meetings all day," he said, without looking up from his phone. "Probably won't be home until 8 or 9. The lies were becoming obvious, but I still couldn't bring myself to believe what they might mean. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe A was a client or colleague. Maybe I was being paranoid. The final straw came during his supposed business trip to New York. He had been gone for 3 days when my friend Taylor tagged me in a post on social media. "Great running into Barbara's husband at Maple and Ash last night. You've got a keeper, girl." The post showed a distant picture of someone who looked like James, sitting at a corner table in the dimly lit restaurant. I couldn't clearly see who he was with, but I could see it was definitely a woman with long, dark hair. I called Taylor immediately. "You saw James last night. He's supposed to be in New York." Her hesitation told me everything. "Oh, I guess I made a mistake. It must have been someone who looked like him." But I knew my husband, and I knew my friend was lying to protect me. When James returned from New York 2 days later, I confronted him. "Taylor saw you at Maple and Ash. You weren't in New York." His face flushed with anger. "Are you having me followed now? Yes, I came back a day early for a client emergency and didn't want to disturb you. Taylor must have seen me at a business dinner. This paranoia has to stop, Barbara. It's getting unhealthy." I knew he was lying. The gaslighting was becoming unbearable. Was I going crazy? Was I imagining things? I reached out to our mutual friend Michael, who had always been closer to James. "Michael, I need to know the truth. Is James seeing someone else?" Michael went quiet on the phone. "Barbara, I think you need to talk to James about this." "So that's a yes," I whispered, my heart breaking. "I didn't say that. Just talk to your husband." I couldn't sleep. I lost my appetite. I lost 10 pounds in 3 weeks. My co-workers noticed. My friends noticed, but I couldn't admit what was happening, not even to myself. I kept hoping for another explanation, any explanation, besides the obvious. Finally, against every principle I held, I hired a private investigator. The PI, a retired police detective named Frank, was kind but straightforward. Most of the time when people hire me, they already know the truth. They just need proof. A week later, Frank delivered his report. Multiple photographs of James entering a hotel downtown, always around lunchtime, always staying for approximately 2 hours. The woman's face wasn't clear in any of the photos, always obscured by sunglasses, a hat, or the angle, but her figure was slim, with long, dark hair. "I can continue surveillance if you want a clear identification," Frank offered. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "No, I'll handle it from here." That night, when James said he had a late meeting, I decided to follow him myself. I had to see with my own eyes what I already knew in my heart. I had to know who she was. I parked my car a block away from James's office and waited. At exactly 6:15, I watched him exit the building and walk to his car. I followed at a safe distance as he drove not to a hotel this time, but to a restaurant on the north side. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I watched him park and check his phone. He was smiling at whatever message he received. I waited for 10 minutes, giving whoever he was meeting time to arrive, then entered the restaurant. The hostess led me to a table near the back, and that's when I saw them. James and Audrey, sitting in a corner booth holding hands across the table, my husband and my stepsister. Time seemed to stop. The restaurant noise faded to a distant hum. All I could focus on was their intimate posture, the way he leaned in to whisper something that made her laugh, the way her hand caressed his. They hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment I considered leaving, pretending I hadn't seen them. But something inside me snapped. I walked straight to their table. Well, isn't this cozy? Their heads whipped up in perfect synchronization faces, morphing from intimate happiness to shock and fear. James immediately dropped Audrey's hand. "Barbara," he stammered, "this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Because it looks like my husband and my stepsister on a date." Audrey had the audacity to look annoyed rather than ashamed. "We were just having dinner, Barbara. Don't make a scene." "A scene?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "You're worried about a scene. How long has this been going on?" The restaurant had gone quiet, other diners pretending not to watch the drama unfolding. James stood up, trying to take my arm. "Let's talk about this at home, not here." I jerked away from his touch. "Do not touch me. Answer my question. How long?" "Barbara, please," he begged, his eyes darting around at the watching customers. 6 months, Audrey said flatly. "And if you weren't so obsessed with your career, maybe you would have noticed sooner." The words hit like a physical blow. 6 months. Half a year of lies, and she was blaming me. I turned and walked out, tears finally breaking free as I reached my car. I could hear James calling my name behind me, but I drove away, hands shaking on the wheel. Somehow, I made it home safely, though I barely remembered the drive. I was sitting in our dark living room when James arrived 20 minutes later. "Barbara, we need to talk," he said, turning on the lights to find me staring blankly ahead. 6 months, I whispered. "You've been sleeping with my stepsister for 6 months. Was it happening when we celebrated our anniversary, when we talked about starting a family?" He sat across from me, not denying it anymore. "It just happened. We never meant to hurt you." "It just happened," I repeated incredulously. "For 6 months. Did you accidentally fall into bed with her every week for half a year? I love you, Barbara. I never stopped loving you," he said, as if that made anything better. "If this is your version of love, I don't want it." He took a deep breath. "I think we should consider an open marriage." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "What? An open marriage?" he repeated, more confident now. "Lots of couples do it. It's the modern way to handle these things. Our relationship has always been strong, but sometimes one person can't fulfill all another person's needs." "You want me to agree to let you keep sleeping with my stepsister?" My voice rose with each word. "It doesn't have to be just about Audrey and me," he said quickly. "You could explore connections too. It could strengthen our relationship, bring a new dimension to our marriage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man who had vowed to be faithful, who had built a life with me based on trust, was now suggesting we simply change the rules to accommodate his betrayal. "Get out," I whispered. "Barbara, be reasonable. At least think about it. Divorce is so messy, so final. We have a good life together. Why throw it all away?" "Because you already did," I said, standing up. "Get out of this house tonight. Stay with her. Stay at a hotel, I don't care. But I can't look at you right now." He left, but not before dropping one more bomb. "Audrey's going through a tough time financially. She lost her apartment. She has nowhere to go." "That's not my problem," I said coldly. "She's family, Barbara. Your family too." I laughed bitterly. She stopped being family when she slept with my husband. For the next week, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work, ignored calls from friends, and spent most days in bed crying. James kept texting, calling, even sent flowers with apology notes. I blocked his number. Then came the worst call of all, my father. "Barbara, honey, Audrey told us what's going on. I know you're hurt, but family has to stick together during difficult times." "Did she tell you she's been sleeping with James?" I asked. The silence told me she hadn't. That's not what she said." "Of course not. She said I kicked her out for no reason, right? That I'm being unreasonable. She said there was a misunderstanding and you weren't letting her explain. James called too, said you two are going through a rough patch, but could work it out if everyone calmed down." My own father manipulated by them. It was the final straw. When James came by the house the next day, I reluctantly let him in. He looked terrible, unshaven and tired, which gave me a small satisfaction. "I've been thinking," I said, surprising him. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we could try this open marriage idea." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Really? You mean it?" "On one condition," I said. "We go to marriage counselling together while we figure this out." He agreed immediately, relief evident on his face. Then he asked the question I was waiting for. "About Audrey. She really does need a place to stay, just until she gets back on her feet." I forced a smile. "She can use the guest room. If we're going to try this new arrangement, I should get used to her being around." James hugged me, thanking me for being so understanding. I hugged him back, my mind already calculating the next steps in what would become my ultimate revenge. 1 week after discovering their affair, I watched from the kitchen window as James helped Audrey move her belongings into our guest room. 3 suitcases, several boxes of clothes, and a collection of expensive makeup and skincare products that I knew she couldn't afford on her sporadic income. I wondered how much of my husband's money had funded her lifestyle over the past 6 months. "Thank you so much for this, Barbara," Audrey said when they finally came inside. "I know this isn't ideal for anyone, but I really appreciate your understanding." I smiled tightly. Family helps family, right? That first dinner together was excruciating. We sat at the dining table I had carefully selected when we bought the house eating takeout because I couldn't bring myself to cook for them. The conversation was stilted, with James trying desperately to pretend everything was normal. "How was work today?" he asked me, as if we were still just husband and wife having a regular dinner. "Fine," I replied. "The Johnson campaign is launching next week." "That's the sporting goods company, right?" Audrey chimed in. "James was telling me all about your projects. You're so talented." The casual mention of their private conversations about me sent a wave of nausea through my stomach. I excused myself before dessert, claiming a headache. As days turned into weeks, the tension in the house became unbearable. I would wake up to find them having coffee together in the kitchen, laughing over some private joke. I'd come home from work to discover Audrey had rearranged the living room furniture or used my expensive face masks. Once I found her wearing one of my sweaters. "Oh, I hope you don't mind," she said when I pointed it out. I was cold and it was just lying there. It wasn't just lying there, it had been in my closet. She had been going through my things. The worst moments were at night. My bedroom shared a wall with the guest room, and they made no effort to be quiet. I would lie awake, listening to muffled laughter, whispers, and worse, stuffing a pillow over my head to block out the sounds. In the mornings, James would still climb into our bed, as if nothing had happened, trying to maintain the facade that ours was the primary relationship. "We need to set some boundaries," I said during our first marriage counselling session, which they had both reluctantly agreed to attend. Dr. Winters, a compassionate woman in her 50s, looked between the 3 of us with barely concealed surprise. She had clearly not expected me to bring both James and Audrey to the session. "I thought it was important for us all to be on the same page," I explained innocently. "Well, this is unusual, but if everyone is comfortable," Dr. Winters began. "Perfectly comfortable," I assured her. "We're trying an open marriage arrangement, and since Audrey is living with us, I thought she should be part of establishing the ground rules." The look on James's face was priceless. He had clearly expected these sessions to be an opportunity to manipulate me back into a traditional marriage while continuing his affair in secret. Now he was trapped in a public admission of the arrangement. "I see," Dr. Winters said carefully. "And everyone entered this arrangement willingly." "Absolutely," I lied smoothly. "It's a modern solution to modern problems." Throughout the session, I calmly outlined reasonable boundaries while secretly recording everything on my phone in my purse. James and Audrey stumbled through their responses, clearly uncomfortable with the legitimate therapist questioning their behaviour and motivations. After 3 weeks of this arrangement, I invited our friends over for dinner. James tried to cancel, but I insisted. They're our friends. We can't avoid them forever, I argued. Besides, if we're going to make this work, we have to be honest about our new lifestyle. He panicked. Barbara, we don't need to announce our personal business to everyone. I'm not suggesting we announce anything, I said innocently. But Audrey lives here now. People will notice. Better to be upfront than have them think something sordid is happening. The dinner party was a masterpiece of passive aggression. I seated Audrey next to James, directly across from his best friend Michael and Michael's wife Stephanie. Throughout the evening, I was the perfect hostess, while making comments that highlighted the strange dynamic. Audrey, would you pass James the salt? You know how he likes extra on his potatoes. James and Audrey went to that new jazz club downtown last weekend. They said the music was amazing. Who finished the good bourbon? James, did you and Audrey have some last night after I went to bed? By dessert, our friends were exchanging confused glances. After James and Audrey cleared the plates, I could see Michael corner him in the kitchen, their conversation intense but hushed. When everyone had left, James exploded. What was that? You practically told everyone I'm sleeping with Audrey. Isn't that what you wanted? I asked calmly. An open marriage means being open about it, doesn't it? You're trying to humiliate me, he accused. No, I'm trying to live honestly. Isn't that what you said we should do? Later that night, I called my best friend Madison, the only person I had told the full truth to. How was the dinner party from hell? She asked. Exactly as planned, I replied. James is furious, but what can he say? That he wants to cheat on me in secret, while pretending we have a normal marriage to our friends. Madison sighed. Barbara, I know you're hurt, but this revenge plan of yours, I'm worried about you. Why not just file for divorce and be done with it? Because that's what he expects, I explained. He thinks he can have everything his way, the beautiful house, the loyal wife at social functions, and the exciting affair on the side. I want him to understand exactly what he's chosen. And Audrey, what about her? She knew exactly what she was doing when she pursued my husband. She deserves everything coming her way. That conversation solidified my resolve. I was done being a victim. I would not quietly accept their betrayal and crawl away broken. If they wanted to destroy what we had built, I would make sure they lost everything too. From that moment on, every move I made was calculated, every apparent acceptance of their relationship a step in my master plan. I began documenting everything, photos of them together in our home, recordings of conversations where they discussed their relationship, screenshots of text messages I occasionally glimpsed on their phones. I created a detailed timeline of the affair based on credit card statements and receipts. I found hotel charges from business trips that never happened, gifts purchased that I never received. The pieces were falling into place and neither of them suspected a thing. They thought they had won, that I had accepted defeat. They had no idea what was coming. With a clear goal in mind, I approached my revenge methodically, like one of my marketing campaigns. The first step was gathering information, and for that I needed professional help. I researched divorce attorneys and found Elaine Bertram, known for handling high-profile divorces with ruthless efficiency. I'm living with my husband and his mistress, who happens to be my stepsister, I told her during our first meeting. Elaine didn't even blink. I've heard worse. Tell me everything. For 2 hours, I laid out the situation, showing her the evidence I'd already collected. She was impressed but wanted more. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity can still impact financial settlements, especially if we can prove dissipation of marital assets, she explained. Has he been spending money on her gifts, trips, expenses? I nodded. Constantly. Jewelry dinners, even helping with her rent before she moved in. Good. We need to document all of that. Also, do you have access to your financial accounts, all of them? I realized I didn't. James had always handled our investments, though. I had access to our joint checking account. Start there, Elaine advised, but be careful. Don't give him any reason to suspect you're planning to leave. Act normal, maybe even a little defeated. The next day, I casually mentioned to James that I was considering taking a financial planning course for work. They're offering it as professional development. I realized I know nothing about our long-term investments. It's embarrassing when clients talk about their portfolios and I'm clueless. James, relieved that I was focusing on work rather than our home situation, was happy to walk me through our accounts. I took careful notes of account numbers, passwords, and balances, acting impressed by his financial acumen. What I discovered over the next few weeks shocked me. James had been systematically moving money from our joint investment accounts into private accounts in his name only. Nearly $300,000 had been diverted over the past year. I documented everything without alerting him to my discovery, but the financial deception went deeper. Using the passwords he'd shared, I found evidence that James had been embezzling from his company. Small amounts from client accounts, cleverly disguised as fee adjustments or service charges, were being funneled into a separate account. This explained the expensive gifts for Audrey that even our substantial salaries couldn't justify. I carefully copied all the evidence and stored it in a secure cloud account only I could access. I also made physical copies, which I kept in a safety deposit box at a bank James knew nothing about. Meanwhile, I used my marketing expertise to maintain a perfect facade. I joined them for occasional dinners out, pretended interest in their activities, and even suggested weekend trips where the three of us could bond. Each outing was an opportunity to gather more evidence and lull them into a false sense of security. "You're handling this really well," James said one evening. "I was worried you'd never accept our arrangement." I smiled. "I've realized that fighting change only leads to unhappiness. Besides, Audrey makes you happy, and that's what matters." He looked relieved, and I saw Audrey smirk from across the room. Their arrogance fueled my determination. My next move required finesse. I reached out to James's boss under the pretense of planning a surprise for James's upcoming birthday. "Walter, I'm thinking of throwing James a small party at that steakhouse he loves. Any chance you and Susan could join us?" Walter was delighted. Of course, James has been working so hard on the Eastman account. He deserves a celebration. I casually steered the conversation toward work. "The Eastman account must be demanding. He's been working such long hours." Walter paused. "Eastman, that wrapped up months ago. James hasn't had any major projects recently that would require overtime." I feigned confusion. "Oh, I must have misunderstood. He's been working late 3 or 4 nights a week." The silence on the other end was telling. Barbara James hasn't been staying late at the office. He usually leaves by 5:30. After that revealing conversation, I hired a forensic accountant recommended by my attorney. Within 2 weeks, he provided a detailed report showing exactly how James had been skimming money from client accounts. The total was over $150,000. "This is serious criminal activity," the accountant warned. "Securities fraud, embezzlement. He could face prison time." I thanked him and added his report to my growing file. My next target was Audrey. I needed to understand her pattern of behavior, which led me to track down her ex-boyfriend, a man named Derek, whom she had dated before beginning the affair with James. Finding Derek wasn't difficult. He lived in Milwaukee now, just a 90-minute drive from Chicago. I invented a business meeting there and arranged to meet him for coffee. "I'm surprised Barbara Morgan wants to talk to me," he said when we met at a quiet cafe. "Audrey always said you were the stuck-up stepsister." "Audrey has a talent for creating her own narrative," I replied. "I'm trying to understand her better." Derek laughed bitterly. "Good luck with that. Audrey only cares about Audrey." Over the next hour, he revealed a pattern that confirmed my suspicions. Audrey had a history of pursuing unavailable men, particularly those with money and status. "She did the same thing to my best friend's marriage before she met me," Derek explained. "Wormed her way into their lives, became the wife's friend, then started sleeping with the husband. When that fell apart, she targeted me." "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Because she destroyed 2 years of my life, cleaned out my savings, and left me with trust issues I'm still working through. And because whatever she's done to make you come looking for me must be pretty bad." I didn't confirm his suspicion that she was now involved with James, but his knowing look told me he'd figured it out. Before I left, he provided me with contact information for the couple Audrey had previously targeted, adding another piece to my revenge puzzle. Back at home, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I strategically placed small cameras in the common areas of the house, hidden in innocuous objects like books, picture frames, and decorative items. These weren't to catch them in intimate moments which I had no interest in seeing, but to record their conversations and behaviour when they thought I wasn't around. The footage was illuminating. When I wasn't home, they would discuss me with contempt, laughing at how easily manipulated I was making plans for how they would gradually phase me out of my own life. Once the counselling charade has gone on long enough, we can suggest a trial separation, James told Audrey in one recording. She'll agree because she thinks it might save the marriage. Then we extend it, and eventually she'll accept divorce as inevitable. "How long do you think we need to keep playing along?" Audrey asked, lounging on my sofa, drinking my expensive wine. "A few more months. The prenup has a fidelity clause, but it expires at our 7th anniversary. After that, a divorce will be much less costly for me. So that was the plan. String me along until our 7th anniversary, then discard me with minimal financial consequences." The prenup had indeed included a fidelity clause, but I hadn't realised it had an expiration date. James had clearly planned this timing with precision. "And this house?" Audrey asked, running her hand along the custom countertop I had selected. "Do we keep it or sell it?" "Keep it definitely. The market is only going up in this neighbourhood. Besides, I paid for most of it." That was a blatant lie. My income had contributed equally to our down payment and mortgage. With each new piece of evidence, my plan became clearer. James and Audrey believed they were the clever ones manipulating me while plotting their future together. They had no idea that I was always one step ahead, building a case that would eventually destroy them both. As I reviewed the growing mountain of evidence, a sense of calm satisfaction replaced my initial pain and rage. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice and refusing to be a victim. They had underestimated me, and that would be their downfall. After nearly 2 months of meticulous planning and evidence gathering, I was ready to execute my revenge. The timing needed to be perfect. James's company was holding their annual gala, a black tie affair, where executives, clients, and their spouses gathered to celebrate the year's successes. It was the most important social event on his professional calendar. 2 days before the gala, I announced I had to fly to Los Angeles for an emergency client meeting. "It's terrible timing, I know," I said apologetically. "But the Westfield account is in crisis, and I need to be there in person." "Of course," James replied, clearly relieved to have the house to himself and Audrey for the weekend. "Work comes first, we understand." I packed a small suitcase and left early Friday morning, supposedly heading to the airport. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown and prepared for my return. I had my hair and makeup professionally done, bought a new dress, one that projected confidence and power, and reviewed my plan one final time. Saturday evening, I knew James and Audrey would be at our house getting ready for the gala together, believing I was safely on the other side of the country. I timed my return perfectly, walking through the front door just as they were descending the stairs, dressed in their formal wear. The looks of shock on their faces were priceless. James froze mid-step, while Audrey clutched his arm for support. "Barbara," he finally stammered, You're supposed to be in LA." "The meeting ended early," I said calmly. "I wanted to surprise you by making it to the gala after all. Aren't you pleased?" "Of course." He managed his face pale beneath his tan. "But you don't have anything to wear," I smiled. "I'm already dressed," I said, indicating my elegant black gown. "Shall we all go together? One big happy family." James looked panicked at the thought of arriving with both his wife and his mistress, but I didn't give him time to object. I walked out to where my Uber was waiting and slid into the back seat. "Coming," I called, and they reluctantly followed. The car ride was silent and tense. I could see James texting frantically, probably warning colleagues not to mention my supposed trip to LA. Audrey kept shooting me suspicious glances, clearly trying to figure out what I was planning. When we arrived at the elegant downtown hotel hosting the event, I took James's arm possessively, forcing Audrey to walk behind us as we entered the ballroom. The room was filled with his colleagues, many of whom I knew from previous company events. James Barbara, Walter James' boss, approached with his wife. "Wonderful to see you both, and—" He looked questioningly at Audrey. "This is my stepsister Audrey," I explained smoothly. "She's staying with us temporarily while she looks for a new apartment. We thought it would be cruel to leave her home alone tonight." The explanation seemed to satisfy Walter, though his wife looked slightly confused by the unusual arrangement. James excused himself to get drinks, clearly needing a moment to compose himself. For the next hour, I played the perfect corporate wife, mingling with James's colleagues, laughing at their jokes, showing interest in their families. James grew increasingly nervous as he watched me charm the room, uncertain what I was planning. During dinner, I made sure to be seated with Walter and the other senior executives. The conversation flowed easily as I asked insightful questions about the company's recent projects and future plans. Just as dessert was being served, I made my move. "Walter, I've been meaning to ask about the Reynolds account. James mentioned there were some irregularities with the fee structure." James choked on his wine. Walter looked puzzled. "Irregularities? I'm not aware of any issues with Reynolds." "No," I feigned surprise. "James has been working so many late nights reconciling the numbers. Perhaps I misunderstood." Walter's eyes narrowed slightly. "We should discuss this on Monday, James." James nodded weakly, shooting me a warning glance which I ignored. As the evening progressed, I continued dropping small comments to various executives, hinting at concerns with different client accounts, all ones I knew James had embezzled from. By the end of the night, I could see worried conversations happening in corners, with glances thrown in James's direction. When it was time for dancing, I pulled James onto the floor, holding him close enough that Audrey, watching from the sidelines, could see but not hear us. "What are you doing?" he hissed in my ear as we moved to the music. "Dancing with my husband," I replied innocently. "Isn't that what a devoted wife does? Those comments about the accounts. You need to stop. You don't know what you're talking about." I smiled up at him. "Oh, but I do. I know exactly what you've been doing with those client funds, James. And now your bosses are starting to wonder too." The colour drained from his face. "Barbara, whatever you think you know, I know everything," I whispered, maintaining my smile for anyone watching us. "The embezzlement, the secret accounts, the affair timeline, everything." When the dance ended, I excused myself to use the restroom. As expected, Audrey followed me. "What game are you playing?" she demanded as I reapplied my lipstick. "No game," I replied, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "I'm just done playing yours. If you think you can break us up by making a scene here," I turned to face her. "I don't want to break you up, Audrey. You two deserve each other. I just want you both to understand exactly what you're losing." When we returned to the ballroom, I signaled to a waiter I had arranged with earlier. He approached with a manila envelope, which I took with a generous tip. I found James by the bar, looking anxious as he talked with Walter and another executive. I joined them with a bright smile. "Gentlemen, would you excuse us? I need a private word with my husband." They nodded and moved away, though not far enough that they couldn't observe us. I handed James the envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Divorce papers," I said pleasantly. "My attorney drew them up last week." He stared at me, then at the envelope. "Here. Now, are you insane?" "Open it," I instructed. With trembling hands, he did pulling out not just the divorce papers, but printed screenshots of his private bank accounts, records of his embezzlement, and photos of him and Audrey together with timestamps proving the affair began long before our supposed open marriage arrangement. How did you? He began, his voice barely audible. I told you I know everything. There's copies of all of this on Walter's desk for Monday morning, unless you'd prefer to resign tonight. His face contorted with anger. You vindictive bitch! You'll get nothing if I lose my job. I laughed softly. Check the last page, James. I've already transferred my rightful share of our assets back to accounts in my name only. Everything you stole plus interest. As he frantically flipped through the pages, I continued, Oh, and I've invited some of our closest friends to join us for a nightcap in the hotel bar after this. I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to explain our new living arrangement to everyone. James looked up, panic in his eyes. You wouldn't. I would and I will. Audrey too. I think people deserve to know what kind of people you really are. Before he could respond, Walter approached us again. Is everything all right? You both look rather intense. I smiled brightly. Actually, Walter James has something important he needs to discuss with you. Don't you, honey? Trapped? James could only nod. I squeezed his arm one last time. I'll let you two talk while I find Audrey. We all have so much to discuss tonight. I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear James beginning a halting explanation to Walter, whose expression grew darker by the second. I found Audrey at the dessert table, helping herself to a second piece of chocolate cake. Enjoying yourself? I asked. She glared at me. What did you say to James? He looks like he's about to be sick. The truth. Finally. I glanced toward the bar, where James and Walter were now engaged in an intense conversation. I wouldn't count on him paying your bills anymore, Audrey. His career is over, and so is your meal ticket. What are you talking about? James has been stealing from his company to fund your little romance. Designer clothes, fancy dinners, jewelry, all paid for with embezzled money. Her face paled. I didn't know. Of course you did. You just didn't care where the money came from as long as he kept spending it on you. The realization that her comfortable future was evaporating hit her hard. I watched the calculations happen behind her eyes as she tried to figure out a way to salvage the situation. Barbara, I know we've had our differences, but we're still family. Surely we can work something out. I laughed. Family? You called yourself family while sleeping with my husband. Don't worry. I've arranged a special little gathering after this, where all our friends and actual family members can hear the whole sordid story. Panic flashed across her face. You can't do that. Watch me. As promised, I had reserved a private room at the hotel bar. One by one, our closest friends arrived, curious about my mysterious invitation for an important announcement. James and Audrey had no choice but to join us, knowing that their absence would only make things worse. Once everyone was assembled, I stood at the head of the table, champagne glass in hand. Thank you all for coming tonight. I wanted my closest friends to be the first to know that James and I are getting divorced. Shocked murmurs rippled through the group. James stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The reason, I continued calmly, is that for the past 6 months, James has been having an affair with my stepsister Audrey. In fact, she's been living in our guest room for the past 2 months in what James called an open marriage arrangement that I never agreed to. The room went silent. Audrey shifted uncomfortably in her seat as our friends stared at her in disbelief. I'm not sharing this to ask for sympathy, but because I value honesty and believe you all deserve to know the truth. Also, James will no longer be employed at Morton Financial as of tonight, due to some financial irregularities that have come to light. James finally looked up, his face a mixture of rage and defeat. Enough, Barbara. You've made your point. Have I asked innocently. I'm just getting started. For the next 20 minutes, I calmly detailed their betrayal, the manipulation, and the lies. I watched as their friends, our friends, looked at them with increasing disgust. By the end, several people had moved to my side of the table, physically distancing themselves from James and Audrey. When I finished, I raised my glass. To new beginnings and the end of toxic relationships. Everyone except James and Audrey drank to the toast. As people began to leave, many hugged me and offered support. No one spoke to James or Audrey. They sat alone at the far end of the table, finally understanding the full extent of what they had lost. When only the three of us remained, James finally spoke. "You've destroyed everything. Are you happy now?" I gathered my purse and stood. "I didn't destroy anything, James. You did that all by yourself." Audrey remained silent, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "One more thing," I said, pausing at the door. "I've paid for a suite here tonight for myself. The house keys are on the table. You have until tomorrow evening to pack your things and get out. Anything left behind will be donated to charity." I walked out without looking back, feeling not vindication or joy, but a profound sense of reclaiming my power and my life. The revenge was complete, but more importantly, I was free. 6 months have passed since that night at the gala, and my life has transformed in ways I never could have imagined during those dark days, living with James and Audrey. The divorce was finalised last month, much faster than typical proceedings, thanks to the mountain of evidence I had gathered. With proof of James's infidelity and financial misconduct, my attorney Elaine negotiated a settlement that gave me 70% of our assets, including full ownership of our investment portfolio. I sold the house, unwilling to live surrounded by memories of betrayal. Instead, I purchased a luxury apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Every morning I wake up to a view that reminds me of my strength and resilience. The space is entirely mine, decorated exactly as I want, without compromise, filled with art and books that bring me joy. As for James, his downfall was swift and comprehensive. Morton Financial fired him immediately after verifying my evidence of embezzlement. They chose not to press criminal charges in exchange for full restitution, wanting to avoid the negative publicity. But his reputation in the financial industry was destroyed. Last I heard, he was working as a car salesman in Indiana, living in a one-bedroom apartment and struggling to make child support payments to his ex-wife from his first marriage, a detail he had conveniently omitted during our relationship. Audrey's fate was equally satisfying. When James lost his job and money, she quickly abandoned him, trying to reintegrate herself into our family by playing the victim. "James manipulated me," she told my father and stepmother. "I never meant to hurt Barbara." But the detailed timeline I had provided to my family proved her lies. She had pursued James relentlessly, initiating the affair during a period when I was caring for my sick mother in California. My father finally saw her for who she really was and refused to bail her out financially. She moved to Florida last month, apparently engaged to an older businessman she met online. I give it a year before she repeats her pattern. My professional life flourished amid the personal chaos. The focus and strategic thinking I applied to my revenge translated well to my career. 3 months ago, I was promoted to Senior Vice President of Creative Strategy, overseeing a team of 15 and managing our agency's largest accounts. My boss cited my remarkable poise under pressure and strategic brilliance as reasons for the promotion, unaware that I had honed these skills while systematically dismantling my failed marriage. The healing process wasn't instantaneous, of course. For the first few months, I struggled with trust issues and occasional bouts of anger. I found a therapist, Dr. Raymond, who specialized in betrayal trauma. Unlike the marriage counselor I had manipulated as part of my revenge plan, I was completely honest with Dr. Raymond. "What you did was unconventional, she told me during one session, but it gave you back the control that was taken from you. Now, the challenge is learning to trust again. I joined a support group for divorced women where I met incredible people who had survived similar betrayals. Among them was Catherine, whose husband had left her for her cousin after 15 years of marriage. We bonded over our parallel experiences and became close friends. She introduced me to hiking, and we spent weekends exploring forest preserves around Chicago. The physical exertion and natural beauty providing a different kind of therapy. I also reconnected with old friends who had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. My college roommate, Tasha, whose wedding had introduced me to James, visited from Seattle. We stayed up all night talking, and I realized how much I had missed female friendship during the years I had prioritized my relationship with James. I never liked him, Tasha confessed after her third glass of wine. He looked at other women too much, even at our wedding. But you seemed so happy, I didn't want to say anything. I wish you had, I replied, but I probably wouldn't have listened anyway. Surprisingly, one of the most healing relationships came from an unexpected source. After exposing James and Audrey, I contacted the woman Derek had mentioned, whose marriage Audrey had previously damaged. Lisa and I met for coffee, expecting to simply compare notes on Audrey's manipulation tactics. Instead, we discovered a genuine connection that evolved into a meaningful friendship. Having both experienced the same type of betrayal created an understanding between us that others couldn't fully comprehend. 3 months after the divorce proceedings began, I tentatively agreed to a dinner date with Michael, a marketing director I met at an industry conference. The evening was pleasant, the conversation easy, but I wasn't ready. When he texted about a second date, I was honest. "I'm still healing," I wrote. "I'd like to try again in a few months if you're still interested." To my surprise, he respected my boundaries completely. We maintained a friendly, professional relationship, and last week, I finally took him up on that second date. We're taking things very slowly, but for the first time, I'm open to the possibility of trusting someone again. My relationship with my father has also evolved. After initially siding with Audrey, he came to recognize the manipulation he had enabled throughout our lives. During a difficult but necessary conversation, he acknowledged how his choices after marrying Margaret had affected me. "I was so focused on making my new marriage work that I didn't protect you the way I should have," he admitted. "I'm sorry, Barbara." Those simple words healed a wound I hadn't fully acknowledged. We're closer now than we've been since my childhood, speaking weekly and planning a father-daughter trip to Yellowstone next summer. As I reflect on the past year, I recognize that my revenge, while satisfying, was not the most important part of my journey. The true victory wasn't in destroying James and Audrey, but in discovering my own strength and rebuilding a life that is authentically mine. The woman who meekly accepted an open marriage and her stepsister moving into her home is gone, replaced by someone who understands her worth and refuses to accept anything less than the respect she deserves. The most profound lesson I've learned is that forgiveness isn't always about the other person. I haven't forgiven James or Audrey in the traditional sense, and I don't believe I'm obligated to. What I have done is forgive myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for doubting my instincts, for temporarily losing myself in the pain of betrayal. I no longer define myself by what happened to me, but by how I responded and who I've become. The betrayal was painful, yes, but it was also the catalyst for the most significant personal growth of my life. I'm stronger now, more self-aware, more attuned to my needs and boundaries. I value authenticity above comfort and truth above temporary harmony. If you're experiencing something similar to what I went through, remember this: you are not defined by someone else's betrayal. Their choices reflect their character, not your worth. The path forward may not be a straight line, and healing isn't always linear, but reclaiming your life is both possible and worth every difficult step. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What helped you find your strength again? Please share in the comments below. And if you found my story helpful, consider subscribing to hear more journeys of resilience and renewal. Remember that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about getting even, but about moving forward into a life better than you had before. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and peace on your own journey, whatever challenges you may be facing.